Whether or Not is currently on its 10th season, which means 10 years of Whether or Not. For this week's story, I will give you a little taste of history as we look into the past of Whether or Not. The founder of Whether or Not and a familiar face of Weatherworld, Paul Knight, took time to explain exactly how Whether or Not got its start.
Whether or Not began with the idea back in, I think it was 2000, when we understood that there was an interest among our aspiring TV weather broadcasters and the undergraduates to want to have a weather show of their own. And at that time, we were trying to work with various entities on campus and off campus in producing a daily or several times a day weather show, but that was just not practical. So the thought came to my mind that perhaps for just a little bit of expense to buy a Macintosh computer at that time, which had many of the ingredients and the applications that you need to be able to produce a daily show or a weekly show, that we could find the right talent among the students and see if they could create their own show, mimicking a little bit after Weatherworld, but something that would be still their own, and they called it Whether or Not.
Paul is still our advisor today, along with another familiar face from Weatherworld, Dr. John Neese. Dr. Neese came on board the Whether or Not crew about 6 years ago when he arrived from his previous job at the Weather Channel. And with this experience, what better of a person to help advise the Whether or Not crew? Dr. Neese explained what his expectations of Whether or Not are.
Well, I think our expectation level is always high. We expect professional work because so many of the Whether or Not students go on to do television. My expectations change because students have different strengths. Some are better forecasters. Some are better storytellers. So my expectation is that each season of Whether or Not will bring something new because of the new faces.
Viewers at home must notice a gradual improvement of the talent here at Whether or Not throughout the course of the season. I attribute that to the frequency of how often we record and practice and the helpful critiques that both Dr. Neese and Paul Knight email to the talent every week. A good amount of Whether or Not team members go into television. For example, you may remember Drew Anderson, who is located in the Lancaster area and works at WGAL. Or how about Jen Ziegenfuss, who is from Season 6, who worked at WBOC in Salisbury, Maryland. Or Jim Dickey, who is employed at AccuWeather currently. Tim Buckley is currently working at WWAY in southeastern North Carolina. And Brian Monahan filled in at Good Morning America and currently works in Florida. Alyssa Corfont moved to Roanoke, Virginia and is the meteorologist at WSLS. Or how about Rachel Frank? She won an Emmy as the best weathercaster in New England at Fox, Connecticut. These are just some of the few names I've picked out, but there are many other Whether or Not team members who have gone on to have successful careers in television meteorology. I also asked Dr. Neese and Paul Knight what their expectations are for Whether or Not in the next 10 years.
I think one of the real challenges for Whether or Not during the next decade is to keep up with the rapidly changing pace of television weather. Things now are done so differently than they were just 10 years ago, and who can imagine what will be the ways you tell your stories 10 years from now? So I think it's keeping up with the technology, keeping up with the graphics, and keeping up with the new stories that continue to emerge in meteorology.
It has been absolutely remarkable for me to see how each team, and we're talking about season 10 right now, has improved and taken the program a notch higher than the previous one. And I am just delighted. Every year I just look forward to seeing where we'll go with the next team. Even the new Open that is evident in this season's program, I think is a real tribute to the creative talents of the folks involved this time around.
I am so proud to consider myself a part of the Whether or Not legacy. The show has given me so much experience and knowledge that I can take with me as I pursue my career. Thank you and happy birthday, Whether or Not. 10 years on air and hopefully another 10 more. For Whether or Not, I'm Mary Sharkey.